welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have MaryTrump back on the show. Activist, the host of the MaryTrump Show on YouTube and podcast, The Nerd Avengers, which I'm a part of sometimes, which you should check out every Tuesday noon Eastern time. Also author of the best-selling book, Too Much and Never Enough, and always raising these issues in a way that need to be with the passion that needs to be. So Mary, thank you so much for being here on the 2-year anniversary of January 6th.
Thanks, Dean. I wish I could say it was something worth celebrating, but there's sort of nothing about. Obviously, it was a dark day in American history, but we also can't celebrate the fact that anybody's been held accountable for it, really, other than the foot soldiers. Well, I do want to say you are a full-time nerd avenger, whether you can join us every week or not. I think that is important to point.
Well, thank you. And yeah, what do you get someone for the 2-year anniversary of an insurrection? Is there, 1 year it should be an indictment. It really should. And, I mentioned this before we started. On my YouTube page, I have some clips from this show, some video clips. And the most popular video clip on my page is one we did about a little less than a year ago. It was after January 6th. And I asked you, did you think Donald Trump enjoyed watching the attack? And this before the January 6th hearing had really dug down into it, that we know now he did. He watched it on TV. Even his own daughter asked him to stop it, and he wouldn't stop it.
Right.
What did you know about Donald, your uncle, that made you realize this guy really enjoyed this attack and was rooting for the attackers?
Well, he will enjoy anything that is done in service to him. And he lost. He's a loser. So this, I believe, in his mind, this whole thing was to create a new narrative and to strike the loss off the list and replace it with a win. Because again, for people like him, it's not winning fairly that matters. It's winning by any means necessary, even if it means turning a loss into a win by cheating or inciting an armed insurrection against your own government. So it's really simple. It's everything to do with supporting his very, very fragile ego.
I tweet daily the countdown. Since how many days since January 6th? I know for 2 years. I was doing days, but now I could do years. 2 years. Tomorrow will be 2 years plus 1. And there are friends who are progressives or Democrats who will say, you got to relax. Garland's got it. Or they always tell me, this is not an episode of Law and Order. And I got to get your take. If a Democratic president did exactly what Donald Trump did, do you think a Republican attorney general would have not charged that Democratic president 2 years later at this point?
And he or she should have. To say relax, first of all, there's no evidence that Merrick Garland's got this. The only positive step I've seen that he's taken is to appoint a special counsel, Jack Smith. Even though I was infuriated by it at the time, I now think it was a good move because Merrick Garland doesn't have this. So there's no relaxing here. I mean, why we can't relax? Because what's happening in the House right now is a direct result of our failure to hold 100, and I've lost count, over 120 Republicans, members of Congress accountable for being actively seditionist against the government they are now trying to drive into the ground.
And I want to get to that, the interrelationship between the two. Today, President Biden is going to honor people who stood up to Donald Trump's efforts, from Capitol Police officers to election workers, Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who Donald just smeared again a few days ago, despicably. What a contrast. We see President Biden honoring those who stood up to an attempted coup and a terrorist attack. And Donald Trump and some of his kindred spirits on the right have honored Ashley Babbitt, have talked about pardoning. Donald Trump has talked about pardoning the terrorists. I can't think of a more striking contrast. And as I say that, I organically become angry. Maybe because I'm half Sicilian, I get angry easy. But I organically get angry as I think about this, and the fact that he is still leading in most polls against Ron DeSantis and the GOP. They still love the guy. This is shocking to me.
But it reveals a lot, and I think what I've started doing in the last few months is turning away from trying to figure out elected Republicans. We need to figure out the people who continue to vote for these people. Like who votes for Matt Gaetz and thinks that's a good idea? For who voted for a Democrat in 2020, and then 2 years later was like, yeah, 2 years, they just look what information, what data do they use to decide to make that big a shift, especially when it means putting these arsonists in charge of our government, and we see how that's going. So I'm so angry. It's exhausting to be angry all of the time.
I know.
But there are tens of millions of our fellow citizens who are absolutely anti-democratic, they're anti-American, and they're basically anti-human. I mean, I always think of it this way. They all want me and people like me dead. I just want them to have health care. It's like, that's the contrast.
That's so funny. Yeah. I should respond to people who send me hateful emails and go like, you know what? I get your anger, but I just wish you health care. I wish you no deductible on your insurance. I wish you, whatever kind of benefits of the government that you need. I'm chatting with MaryTrump. Mary, I mean, this is something been documented now. Since 2000, over 70 countries have prosecuted former leaders for crimes. I honestly don't think this is a bridge too far. No, in no other first world country would Donald Trump not be charged 2 years after this attempted coup. That's my view based on the history that we've lived through in recent times with countries from France, South Korea, Malaysia, Israel, and on, who have no problem prosecuting their former leaders for crimes.
No, there's so much.
Well, is it because the justice system really is, if you're rich, wealthy, and white, that's it? That's the way it works?
We've never held any rich, white, powerful man accountable in this country. I mean, Nixon was allowed to resign and then rehabilitate himself later by becoming, who cares? He was not held accountable sufficiently. Neither was Spiro Agnew. He was allowed to make a deal and slink off with all of his stolen bribe money. So it's partially just sort of built in to the structure of the government, but all of those failures accumulate and they lead to more impunity of greater infractions. I mean, I don't know that anybody nobody since the Civil War has committed as serious crimes against America as Donald Trump has. And yet we just cannot figure out how to say, oh, that's bad and you should be punished. And Dean, that's why it's a large part of the reason why we're in this mess, that this man who is now a private citizen and had no right to steal hundreds of thousands of pages of highly sensitive, top secret government documents. He wasn't allowed to steal anything, even if it wasn't top secret and highly sensitive. He's allowed to run for the presidency, and he's allowed, and this to me is the more troubling thing, to endanger the lives of two private citizens who were simply trying to do their jobs by making sure the vote counts were accurate and legal. It's just mind-blowing. And again, 8 Republican senators voted to overturn the results of a free and fair election. Over half of the Republican caucus in the House, same thing. We have a mechanism to make sure, at the very least, they can serve in government again. What happened to the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? It's very, I don't know who's in charge of this thing, but when you have somebody inciting people to go attack the Capitol, it seems like a pretty open and shut case to me. But clearly, there's something I don't know.
No, and there are organizations that have been involved in that, and I've written about them, to ban Donald Trump. Section 3, 14th Amendment, are going to use it, and they're going to just bring state by state action probably in this year as things start heating up for the election. And I've told them I gladly volunteered to be the plaintiff in New York, because you just need a human being as a plaintiff to bring the lawsuit. It's a civil lawsuit. It's not a criminal lawsuit. Right. Anyone can bring the lawsuit. And they did knock out in Otero County, New Mexico, a guy who was involved in the insurrection. And it was a great opinion by the judge. I wrote about it for MSNBC. I'm chatting with MaryTrump. So Mary, you touched on it earlier, and let's get back to it now. What's happening in the House? So just in the big picture, you see a connection between the January 6th attack and what is happening now in terms of the insurrection against the speaker and the speaker vote?
Yeah, because there's this very frustrating narrative in a lot of the media right now that it's the conservatives, the group of 20 who will never vote for Kevin McCarthy, or most of them won't. They're conservatives, and the rest of the caucus is somehow moderate. This is insanity. They are all extremists. They're all election deniers. I mean, think about it. And this is why I think the two things are connected. They normalized the big lie. Many of them embraced it. They've been normalizing January 6th. Many of them participated in it. And you know what, at this point, if 2 years on, you're not willing to call it what it is, you're complicit as well. And you have no right serving in the American government. So they've all become empowered. So what do you get somebody for the second anniversary of January 6th? Well, if you're a Republican, you get as many votes as you want in the House of Representatives until you are made Speaker of the House, apparently.
I mean, on some level, is it the fact that GOP now for years has been also championing minority rule, that they don't care about majority opinion? So that on Roe v. Wade, with gerrymandering, with electoral college. So if you believe in that, it really is a selfishness. Like, I don't care what the others think. I want what I want. So I'm a minority of the GOP caucus. That is sort of their DNA, their modus operandi is minority rule. That's it. Well, what are you telling me now? It doesn't rule?
Yeah. Well, think about the breathtaking selfishness of a Kevin McCarthy. He had months to count to 218, and he still can't do it. The families who came to see their loved ones sworn in, you know, the amount of taxpayer dollars being burned in this fruitless endeavor. But the whole minority, that's the great irony here. Kevin McCarthy and the group of 200 who were sticking with him, they're complaining that 2% of the caucus are trying to dictate what happens for the other 98%, or sorry, it's 10%, the other 90%. And it's like, welcome to the Democrats' world. I mean, first of all, that's what the filibuster accomplishes in the Senate. And secondly, that's what you guys tried to do on January 6th. And we can't exactly say that they didn't succeed at this point, can we?
You know, when I look back, and I just wrote about this for my newsletter on Substack, which is now available for free, which I'm sorry, you know, I was doing it on MailChimp, but I just moved over to Substack. It's not like a real plug, but I wrote about January 28th, 2021. To me, was a day Kevin McCarthy lost his speakership. And that's the day he flew down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Donald Trump. But 2 weeks before, he was really a leader. He went on the floor, he denounced Trump, said he was responsible. Then his own cold calculation realized, I have to appease the fascists if I'm ever going to be speaker. And what we're seeing now is every effort to appease him, they view as weakness. They mock him. They have Matt Gaetz is openly mocking him and ridiculing. Even Tucker Carlson's ridiculing him. He didn't get the lesson that we have to learn through history. You can appease fascists. That you still might lose, but at least have some honor in losing and fight them. I think part of this is Kevin McCarthy thought he could appease the fascists, that they would respect him and support him. Nope, they mock him and deride him.
And also, it's hard to mock a fascist if you're also a fascist, or at least fascist adjacent, right? So yeah, it is. I think the Schadenfreude and joy have passed. I now just find this deeply depressing, and it's so bad for our country and in so many ways. But to see, I think it's safe to say that Kevin McCarthy is as good a deal maker as Donald Trump at this point. You know, that he doesn't understand that every time he gives in, he gets weaker and they hate him more.
Yeah.
So it's like they hate nothing more than weakness, which is sort of why it's weird they like Donald. But, you know, here's the difference. Donald never thinks he owes anybody anything, that he's the one who's owed. And McCarthy's flipping that on its head. So we see that at least is one way in which Donald kind of understands how these things work. And McCarthy had never learned that lesson.
And you've also have the New York Times reporting that Donald Trump is calling Republicans and the term they use is dispassionately in terms of trying to get them to support McCarthy, because even he doesn't respect McCarthy. And I don't know if you live in that world, like for us, it's a lot of selfishness and bravado and all that. But in that world, if you don't realize that kissing up to the extremists is going to fail every time, Kevin McCarthy deserves all this. Like, I mean, I don't even look at him as a human being, because then I might feel sorry for him, because we are compassionate people.
Right.
But as a human, this is horrible what he's going through. And he sits there with that horrible grin, just like the awkward grin he had when he met with Donald Trump on January 28th, 2021 at Mar-a-Lago, and put out a statement saying, Donald Trump has never been more popular as president than he is today. And you're like, you deserve this, Kevin McCarthy. And I'm happy about that. But there's a point, though, where it will Democrats, do you think at some point Democrats, since we want to govern, we believe that the House should pass legislation, that they're the ones that come up with some kind of compromise? Because I don't think he gets the votes with the GOP.
No, the Democrats, I'm so impressed by the Democrats, and this is entirely, well, not all completely, but much of this is due to the brilliant leadership of Nancy Pelosi. I think the team she picked to replace leadership in the House is also brilliant. I adore all of them, Hakeem Jeffries on down. I think the unity the Democrats are showing, the passion they're showing, the contrast they're striking against their incompetent, selfish, anti-government colleagues is really important going forward. They need to stand strong. It is not their place to compromise. And what I've been hearing is that Republicans haven't approached the Democrats at all. The Republicans need to get to the point where they understand they need the Democrats if they are still falling short in excess of 5 votes. They need the Democrats. They would need to make concessions. That's how it works. And I am thrilled, actually, that the Democrats are not wavering at all. So I think that just bodes really well going forward. It bodes incredibly well for 2024, certainly, if there's even election in 2024, because who knows if there will even be a Speaker of the House.
But what do you think? AOC said 2 days ago to the New York Daily News that, look, if they were to offer us good committee assignments and some compromise on legislation, because the key is getting legislation to the floor. So that's rules committee stuff. If they offer real substantive compromise to the Democrats to make a deal like old time, what about that? Would you be fine with that?
But that's what I'm saying. But that's up to Republicans. Right. Democrats can't do that.
No.
And
so
it also means,
like if they make a real deal where Democrats get something, it's not like Democrats saving them and doing nothing more than saving them and we reopen the House. It's got to be they get something substantive in return, and you'd be fine with that?
Well, let me clarify something. That's actually what needs to happen unless they find a consensus candidate. But Democrats cannot accept Kevin McCarthy as Speaker because of what that represents. If Kevin McCarthy is Speaker, that means that Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene are Speaker. So I think they've made it pretty clear that Kevin McCarthy is an unacceptable candidate, and I think that's absolutely right. And they need to stand ground there. Right. But Dean, I think the tricky question going forward is, if they pick somebody else, is that person starting from scratch in the negotiations, or do the 20 say, hey, listen, we were already offered all the stuff, we still want that? And if they don't budge from that position, then whoever Speaker will be just as weakened and hobbled and bought, so to speak, as Kevin McCarthy would be. And that's the real conundrum at this point, I think.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting how it plays out today, maybe over the weekend. We don't know. They could reach a deal today, but it seems like they want to peel away maybe 10 of the 20 who are opposing, and then put a lot of pressure on those other 10 who do not seem at all like they're going to give in, from what I've heard. And ultimately, the real deal for the good of the House is a unity deal where Democrats get some good stuff, maybe co-chairs of some key committees, a guarantee they can bring certain legislation to the floor of the House without having a majority of the GOP caucus. And then you don't have to deal with that rule where you can have a vote of no compromise with 1 or even 5 members of the House. You can have, elected by a large swath. Last 2 things, I'm chatting with MaryTrump. I don't know if you saw it. Ginny Thomas came out against Kevin McCarthy. I'm not kidding. And that just goes to that's the idea of, like, you go completely unpunished for your role in trying to embolden a coup and incite a coup. So now you're like a normal Republican. She actually put out, we need new leadership, and she doesn't want Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. I'm like, okay, we're in crazy. Just, I don't know what to say.
You know, listen, anybody who thinks Liz Cheney is a hero needs to understand that the whole reason Ginny Thomas is allowed at this point to make her her concerns known about what's happening in the House, it's because Liz Cheney refused to allow Ginny Thomas to be properly deposed, to be put under oath, and to be indicted, which is what she should have been. But yeah, that's, and
It's remarkable.
it was a weird group. It was Edwin Meese was in that mix. I don't know.
So last thing, because, you know, all of us, I'm guilty of this too, talking so much, responding to what the GOP is doing. In this case, it is the anniversary of January 6th, so it's fine. And we have no speaker, we have no House of Representatives. So that's also a real issue. But looking forward, look, 2023, President Biden, he's going to the border over the weekend. Democrats are talking about other issues that are of concern. They can't pass legislation in the House, but what would you like to see Democrats use 2023, Biden administration, House Democrats, even the minority, and the Senate Democrats in elevating certain key issues? What would you like to see in that priorities?
I think the most important thing is to do it. Well, there are two legislatively important things, and that's voting rights and doing something about protecting people's right to choose, people's right to bodily autonomy. I think the Senate needs to take a larger role in a lot of things, since the House is going to just going to be a total nightmare. And I mean, in terms of investigations and things like that. But listen, I think we have a year before we get deep into election cycle. I know the 2024 election has started already. However, we have a year to focus on governing, right? And I think that the one thing Democrats need to do, considering there was a blue tsunami in November, we have all of the momentum on our side. We are the only adults in the room. We are the only people who care about the American people and democracy. Let's start honoring and empowering our base the way the Republicans kowtow to its base, with the understanding that the Republican base is a bunch of white supremacist Nazis, and our base is a bunch of people who keep saving our asses, you know, Black women and other people of color, and stop telling people like people of color and people in the LGBT community that they have to wait their turn before they get all of their rights. No, we need our base to understand that it is the most important thing, and that's what we're fighting for. And that message has never successfully been out there. So I hope that this is the year we do that.
That would be great. And again, I think it's so important to also talk about affirmatively what we want Democrats to do, as opposed to just responding to the GOP. Well, Mary, thanks so much for being on the second anniversary of January 6th. It's always great to chat with you. Check out the Mary Trump Show on YouTube. Check out her podcast, her newsletter. It's also on Substack. Do you still have a newsletter?
Yeah. It's called The Good in Us.
The Good in Us. All right. Thanks, Mary. Have a great day. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dean. Love being here. Take care.
Thanks a lot.